Let's talk about Susan Cooper's book, The Dark is Rising, a fantasy novel that came out in the early 70s and won the Newbery Award for youth fiction. I think by now it would work perfectly well as adult fiction, but since the protagonist is 12 years old, it does tend to fall into the youth category. It's written as well as you could ask for from any age of novel. And as a fantasy novel goes, it is nothing happens that is too easy. There are real stakes and real challenges to the protagonists that have their parallels in real life. It takes place in the modern world. It's one of those fantasy novels where it's the modern world, except that a few people know that fantastic elements exist and that they're engaged with them. It's a story of a boy named Will Stanton who lives in England. He's the youngest child of a large family, and it begins with his birthday when he discovers a piece of family history he had not been aware of, as well as a sort of fantastical birthright. He discovers that he is actually the seventh son of a seventh son. His father was the son of seven, and he had thought he was the sixth, but that there had been he had an older brother who had died early in infancy, so that technically he was the seventh. Stories about seventh sons being sort of signifiers of sort of specialness, or of having some sort of special destiny, go back pretty far in English folklore. And the fantasy elements of The Dark is Rising are generally drawn on real British folklore. The other element that he discovers is that he is one of the old ones, capital O, old capital O ones. He is the last of them. He's the first to be born in centuries. And this is like that fantastical birthright element that appears in a lot of youth fantasy, where you discover that you are capable, you are heir to a larger world than most people. You know about magic or some such thing. But unlike many of them, which how do I put it, which make it fun to be part of this, it's clear right from the beginning in the tone of the book and in the way in which this is presented to Will that being an old one is really hard, that it's mostly a burden. You're born to this. The old ones are people who work for a group that just is called the Light, and they are struggling to stop the dark, as in the title of the book, The Dark is Rising. Their job is to stop the dark from rising and from seizing control of the magical elements of the world and using them to harm humanity. So they are attempting to gather the magical elements of the world that they need to stop the dark from rising. And Will's part of this is to find 6 signs. He's like the sign seeker. It's his quest, and it's the reason that he's here. They're these little symbols made out of different substances, but they all look the same. They're a circle quartered by a cross, which of course is an ancient folkloric symbol in Britain, and they're about the size of like a watch or a belt buckle. They're each made of a different substance, and there's a little poem that goes along with it that I memorized when I was little reading this book. It goes, "When the dark comes rising, 6 will turn it back. 3 from the circle, 3 from the track. Wood, bronze, iron, water, fire, stone. 5 shall return, and 1 go alone." So the Light is working out this thousands of year old plan to stop the dark, both in the past and in the present. And in order to do that, they have to assemble these various items, and they have to communicate with the other magical powers of the world, because outside of the light and the dark, there are very powerful magical beings who, some are personified, some aren't, but they have to be negotiated with. The light is not all powerful, and neither is the dark, and they are primarily trying to acquire control over other more powerful magical forces in order to accomplish their goals. I like the subtlety of this. I like the levels of this, where it's not just a direct conflict. It's sort of implied that there's not a lot that the light and the dark can do directly to each other, but they can place each other in difficult positions, and they are all moving towards a climactic confrontation, which will decide things once and for all. And this is the second book in a 5-book series. I think it's the best one, although all of them are pretty good. I just like the subtlety of this one, and of course it was the first I read, so I'm probably a little biased in its favor. And although the idea of a quest novel where the main character has to, find a sort of set of magical items in order to accomplish a greater end, although this might seem kind of cliched. You don't have to be quiet just because I'm recording. Although this might seem kind of cliche, they do it really well, because the question then becomes, what kind of quest is this? And that depends a great deal on, what kind of person Will is and what the light is like. And the light is respectful. The light does not seek to dominate. And the way in which Will uncovers the signs is not through, like, cleverness or solving riddles, although there are little bits of those elements, but it's mostly about simply being patient, being aware of what's going on, being respectful, listening to what other people have to tell you, and then following, sort of your intuition and your sense of what is ethical and appropriate. Will's guide has a mentor in this, but because they're both old ones, his mentor, although he's more experienced and all, does not treat Will with the kind of impatient, I'm older than you kind of crap that Dumbledore throws to Harry Potter, or even Obi-Wan throws to Luke Skywalker. He treats him much more as an equal who he just only now happens to have met, and he has a responsibility towards. He does not treat him like a kid. It's very clear that even though Will is only 12 years old, that his heritage as an old one joins him into sort of a circle that sort of goes beyond time. There's a lot of great sequences in this story, and there's a lot of great weaving of the light and the dark and Will's quest into his regular daily life. He still has to, sort of be Will Stanton, regular village schoolboy. He's on, like, holidays and such, but he still has to, clean out the rabbit cages and, visit family. And as the quest continues, he gets more and more evidence of the seriousness of the dark and their real threat to humanity. It's exemplified by a character called the Black Rider, who threatens to interrupt Will's quest several times. The dark, being, the dark, seeks to dominate and control and to sort of force people into binds, and they can't touch these items themselves, but they can try to interrupt Will's quest or make it impossible for him to achieve this. So the real appeal of the dark is to test Will's character. They have a very the dark has a very negative, cynical, controlling attitude towards humanity. They see people as weak and easily pushed around, and so although they know Will is an old one, but they still see him as, like, kind of essentially a young, inexperienced kid, and they don't think he's capable of sort of the ethical seriousness that his quest for the signs will entail. So as Will goes through these stretches, it becomes more about his ethical maturation and his ability to renegotiate what his world is like now that he's learned about these huge stakes going behind, and that he's in a position, going behind his regular reality, and that he's in a position to do something about it, that he has this role to fill. This is exemplified for me in a scene fairly late in the book when Will has almost completed the quest. I think he only has one sign left to get, and there is a flood. There's been a large blizzard, and now it's getting warm, and the snow is melting, and the river is flooding, and the Black Rider has entranced Will's sister into going for a ride with him, and she knows nothing about him. She just sees him as like a nice guy with a pretty horse, and he makes it clear to Will that he is in control of her, and she's on the horse, and he's willing to have the horse sort of ride and throw her into the river where she'll certainly drown. The water's going very fast. He makes it clear he's willing to kill her, and he wants Will to stop the quest or give him the signs in some way, give up. And I don't remember exactly at this long distance from having read the book, but he wants to stop Will's quest. So it's a traditional unfair and cruel hostage taking scene from between a villain and a hero, where the villain puts the hero in the position of making an all but impossible choice between his sister's life and this larger quest. And because this is not a easy fantasy or a super heroic fantasy, and because being an old one, although it gives you certain insight and understanding of certain things, is mostly just a burden. Will does not get an easy way out of this. There's no magical solution. There's nobody telling him what to do. He's far from any other help. No one knows where he is. It's up to him, and he just takes a breath and he tells the rider, no deal. He tells him that he's not going to give up the signs, he's not going to give up the quest, and that even if his sister is harmed or killed, it will not deter him from his broader destiny. And for me, this is a moment of great I'm in admiration of the seriousness of this scene in a fantasy novel generally, and in a fantasy novel for children, because the weight that shows, and the importance that shows of committing to an ideal over all your earlier ties of kinship. When people are growing up, it's hard to commit to an ideal, because the people right around you demand all your attention and the love you feel for them, and so on. That's really your kind of world of ethical commitment. So this old one birthright that Will experiences is like his growing into a larger sense of how his life fits into the whole human story, not just Will as a member of the family. And the age of 12 is about the right time for this to begin to happen. It's when you begin to feel out, how do I fit into the wider world? How do I fit into these other identities I might have of citizenship or of morality? And Will just makes this choice freely. He's not pressured. He's put into a horrible position, but he's not hypnotized or drugged or anything. He makes it of his own free will, and I just think it's very impressive that Susan Cooper had the wit to sort of say to kids, essentially, look, this is kind of what life can be like. You can have to turn your back on family commitments in order to serve a broader ideal. There are stakes that are more important. Now, since it is an novel for children, the Dark do attempt to kill his sister, but they do not succeed. But it's not because of anything Will does. It's it's just chance. And Will goes on to complete the quest. So he sort of narrowly squeaks out of it, but I remember it, it's the horse takes off with his sister, and he holds his breath, and he really has no recourse. He might just witness this. He might witness the horrible consequences of his choice, and then he does essentially luck out, which is it's nice, it's fiction, but it's clear that he understands what he just did, that he understands the decision he just made, and because of that, in the later books, at the end of this book, he very much meets the other old ones on a position of equality, because he's made the same level of commitment to the light that they have, and to stop the Dark Rising. And for the next 3 books, in which Will is a major character, although there are others who become lead protagonists for a while, the Dark never tries that again with him. They certainly try to obfuscate and challenge and create problems for him, but they never again, as far as I can recall, try to undermine his commitment, because he's shown them so thoroughly what they do, and that's that he's committed to the cause of the light, and that is a victory. There is something there that shows, in the real world, we don't contend with the supernatural powers of the Dark, but we do contend with villainy and cruelty, and people who have low expectations of others and see others as primarily something to be twisted and controlled, to be prodded and poked. So the example of Will standing up to the Dark and showing them that not everyone will respond to such twisting is a powerful one, and it's the kind of thing that keeps us from entering into an ethical universe like the one that the Dark would like humanity to live in, where everything is a matter of power and selfishness and control. So well done on using fantasy again for important ethical reasons, Susan Cooper, in this novel as well as in your others. Perhaps I will talk about the others, but right now, The Dark is Rising, this is where I wanted to be.